Right. So how are you guys doing this week?
So far, so good.
Did it feel better than last week? 2 weeks ago when you were writing your position paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Less stress.
Well, I'm not difficult to get along with as long as you're, you be nice to me, I'll be nice to you for the most part. So you may not think that sometimes with comments, but I am really being nice. So with this week, you were turning in a topic. I'm getting my notes out here. This week, you're turning in a topic for your study and 5 references that you think might work. Okay. Do you have any questions about that or anything that we needed to talk about that? Any of you having trouble finding a topic? We need to talk a little bit about your topic or the references that you're looking for.
Can the references, we're not stuck to those 5, right? We can.
Nope. These are 5 that you are starting to look at that you think kind of fit with what you think you're thinking about, because your topic can change, your questions can still change, and your references, you'll probably add to them. Even if you stick with those 5, you'll be adding to them. So, and if you change any kind of direction at all, then you'll be able to switch those out too. This is just so that I know that, you didn't walk in and go, oh, great. Yeah, I was supposed to have come up with a topic and I haven't thought anything about it or looked up anything about it, but here's my topic. So it's just to make sure you're dipping your feet into the pool of
okay. I submitted for the documents retrieval stuff, so I've got 1 back, and now I'm waiting for another 2.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Sometimes it takes time. I mean, the ones that I put in with you, like when I was showing you guys last week, and I said I just submitted those, I got them the next day. So
I just found out one of them's a book, so I really don't know how
long. Oh, yeah, books take a little bit longer. They can take longer. So that might be one you have to hang on to for a while. But wow, you're getting brave reading an ethnography. I'm just kidding. I don't know what it is you're reading. Okay, so for the next week, like for week 3 and 4, basically with week 3, you have a research questions activity where you're going to pick an article you've used, change the research questions so they're qualitative, and then pick an article you think you might use and try and redraft them into the different methods, like whether it would be an ethnography kind of question or whatever, and that'll go along with the reading. We're meeting tonight on the 14th. We will not meet next week, and we will not meet the week after that. The week as a group. On week 4, I will meet with you. You're signing up with individual meetings. If you haven't seen that yet, on the course materials page under week 4 of individual meetings, it says click here to sign up. I put in a lot of times. If they do not match up with something that you can make work, let's say, you have 12-hour work days all week because it's inventory or something like that, then you are more than welcome to email me and say, here is a list of 3 times. Do any of these work for you? Okay, and I can usually make at least one of those work, or else I'll say, none of those work, but how about, I have 6 hours on this day that I don't have anything scheduled. So we'll find a time for it. If it takes a little longer than a half an hour or whatever time slot I have booked off with those, then we can always reschedule something else. Usually we'll hash out the basics in that amount of time, and you can schedule another meeting with me at any time that you need to. Okay, so anytime you feel like you're needing a little bit of guidance or input or whatever, just shoot me a text or shoot me an email, or, say, I need to talk. So even though when you are going to have a section in here where you're off on your own working on this project, we have 1 meeting built into there that's an official class meeting, and then you're going to meet with me another, other times. So you're not by yourself, and you can always touch base with me. I'm here on the end of your balloon string. So you just have to yank on the balloon a little bit. So that's what we're turning in next week. There's a focusing activity. The focusing activity is for you to start to pick through what you think you might look at, okay? To be able, and that's in week 4. It's to be able to pick through and see, here's what the literature that I'm reading, because I'm not assigning you literature to be reading. I'm not telling you a number of articles you have to have. But you need to be thinking about, if this is my topic and this is what I'm going to be looking at, what kind of papers, how many papers do I need to look at in order to have a really good, pretty good understanding of what the background on this topic is. So my guess is a lot of times you're probably going to have maybe 7 or 8 papers that you're really pulling from, because I'm not asking you to do an exhaustive literature review. I'm asking you to do a literature review that's pretty targeted to the area that you're looking in. So if you're looking at ethical dilemmas in a workplace and how people deal with those, then you're going to be looking specifically at ethical, literature about ethical dilemmas in the workplace. You're not going to be looking at ethical dilemmas in school and in the government and in 17 million other settings. You're going to pick, a fairly narrow range of literature to look at, because otherwise you're going to be looking forever. Okay, so maybe 8 articles is a good thing to shoot for when you're starting to look at that. 8 articles is a good place to kind of shoot for whenever you're looking at a minimum kind of number for your literature review. If you're looking at a really, really brand new area, then there may not be literature on that. And in that case, email me. We'll figure out how to find you some literature so you can use it. You have that. But that's basically the 2 assignments. There's nothing that's enormously, time consuming for you to do over the next 2 weeks, like this week and the next one. But that's because you are supposed to be searching for literature for your literature review, starting to pick through these things, because in week 5, your draft is due. So right now you have 3 weeks to basically find all your literature, and we'll be honing your topic over the next 2 weeks. With your questions your topic you submitted to me now, and then your questions that we'll talk about over the next 2 weeks. Okay, so there's that to give you the heads up. So the literature and the things that you've read this week, we're on dealing with, let me make sure I'm not going too far ahead. No, with chapters 1, 2, and 3, we're dealing with designing a qualitative study and kind of answering, I think, a little of the questions that we had a week or 2 ago whenever we were talking about really what is a qualitative study, and is it loosey-goosey, and anything you want to do, you can do, that kind of thing. Did you have any questions about the reading from last week? Not even tackling this week yet. That was about designing a qualitative study, looking at the phases of research design, those kind of things. Basically, chapters 1, 2, and 3 in the.
Yeah, the only thing I got at was it was just kind of hard to keep in my mind visualizing the hierarchy of all the concepts and how they went together. Because and part of it was because of the huge words. Trying to keep that in mind, and then trying to figure out how the hierarchy and then the grouping. So I've been trying to make some cheat sheets that help me.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Not working real good, but I'm trying.
Yeah, they have a couple. Let me see if I can find it in here.
Now, I liked his video, Cresswell's video he had. I wish he had done more.
Yeah, he has a couple really nice resources. I'll have to dig and see if they updated the instructor resources that they give you. Because I think they used to have PowerPoint.
Videos were nice, but he didn't go on further.
No, they're only like this long.
Because he actually talks like a normal human, instead of what he wrote in his book.
Yeah, I think that well, I don't know. The biggest thing I think for right now that we're looking at is just the fact that when you're designing a qualitative study, for the most part, it's going to be in a real setting. You don't tend to do a qualitative study. You don't tend to do. Is this working? Is that better? Okay. You don't tend to do a qualitative study whenever you are in like a laboratory setting where you can say, here are the experimental group, here is my control group, and I'm going to very clearly separate these, and it's going to be a sterile lab condition. A lot of times a qualitative study is going to be in the real world. They tend to be, sitting in a library, watching kids work on things or interact whenever they're studying for their finals. It's going to be, in a classroom where you're watching instruction happen. You can do quasi-experimental or experimental designs that work into those places, but a lot of times you have a lot of really messy variables that go along with them. So the qualitative setting or qualitative research allows you to have this typically settled into these more natural settings where you're going to have a lot of messiness. And that's one of the reasons why when they start talking about qualitative research, one of the ways people do talk about it is to say that you're using a thick, rich layer of description. Okay, so you're going to be telling about this setting. You're going to tell about the people that are there, and that's going to help you kind of situate all of the work and situate all the things that are going on. So the fact that the researcher is there and integral, a lot of times with a quantitative research, like you were looking at for the last semester, you are looking at the fact that they kind of separate it out. You're going to have a lot of different multiple data points and a lot of different methods that you're using. For your paper alone, you're going to be interviewing. You are going to be observing in some way, shape, or form, and we can negotiate what that looks like, whether it's just sitting and watching people, whether it's watching videos or videotape, whether it is observing data points off like Twitter or entries into a wiki or entries into a Google Doc or things like that, discussion board posts. We can negotiate what your observation will look like, but you will have to do some kind of observation. And then, go ahead.
I did see in our readings that you had that, because you mentioned there was just going to be just maybe 3 people that were type interview, but they actually had a group based on the type of questions or qualitative study doing. Some of them are actually up to like 25, it said.
Yeah, but grounded theory is something you're not going to have really time to do this summer, so I'm going to really steer you away from grounded theory type questions. It takes a lot of thought process a lot of the time to really think through grounded theory through the data and get the actual theory developed, and then be able to come back to your data and look at it in this cyclical manner. And so
it's
honestly,
like a feedback loop type of thing.
Sort of, yes, because you're starting with the data and you're actually constructing the theory based on that, the understanding of what's happening, instead of starting with a theory and then trying to understand how people are doing things. So it's kind of backwards to the other approaches. It takes a little more time and a few more people, and in the 4 weeks you have really to conduct your research, you are probably not going to have time to actually do that. So most of the things we're going to do this summer are going to be ethnographic type research with typically a case study. Something like that is what most people end up doing.
If as we're going through this whole doctoral thing, how will there be a class that actually teaches how to do the grounded theory, the more advanced stuff?
This is it. So this is
it.
Yeah, this is the only qualitative class that you get.
So that's why no one's doing qualitative for the most part then, because everyone seems to be quantitative studies.
Most people are doing mixed methods. So like Tammy, who just graduated, or who is just passed her doctoral defense, and so she's now Dr. Kolsky, is my student. Her papers were 2 very quantitative papers and 1 mixed methods, where she had survey results and a little bit of statistics, and then interviews that she used as well. Part of it is that, because we get gypped. You don't get 2 qualitative classes, and I don't know why.
So it seems that from the research studies that I've read, it seems to be when they use a qualitative stuff with a mix, it's just more of a paraphrasing storyline to back up the quantitative result.
What I typically do, a lot of my work can be considered mixed methods work, or straight well, I don't know, I have a straight quant paper and I have a straight qual paper and then some mixed methods. What I typically do is I use just descriptive statistics or like t-test, ANOVA, that kind of thing to set the stage. And then what I do then is flesh it all out. So it's kind of like saying the test scores changed by this amount, and that was statistically significant. However, the real story is, and then I give you, this is how the kids talked about it, and this is how the learning happened, and this is the kind of answers that they wrote with their long questions instead of just the multiple choice questions, that kind of thing. Okay. So we're doing the best. I'm doing the best I can with you guys.
I got an ethic question.
Okay.
Based on what you just said. If you get like certain quantitative results that point in a certain direction, and you've got some qualitative questions in there, and let's say you've got like, I don't know, 10 of them or so, and say 5 or 6 of them help you push, give that correspond with the quantitative ones. Can you throw away the other ones?
Well, okay, so I have a paper due tomorrow night, and we actually had a big conversation about this today. because with the 56 students that we have in this class, the test scores showed no significant change from before and after the intervention. It was only a 3-hour intervention. No, we're not worried about that. But the 3 lowest scores within the students that were consented are actually special needs students. So what do? They're significantly lower than the other students' scores on this creativity scale that we're looking at. Do we exclude them because they're special needs students and maybe they had maybe there's other factors that are confounding it? The fact that their score is like a 16 out of 80, maybe that's not really a representation of their creativity, but a representation of, number one, their patience for somebody to read it to them, or number two, their reading ability, and or their understanding of the question. So, because even though it's written at a 2nd grade reading level, these kids are 5th grade. I don't know what the reading level is. It could be a 1st grade reading level. So what we are going to do for this is we are going to make a notation that there were 3 low scores, and these are the scores that they were there. And we are going to say that these students were part of a special needs population within the school, and that therefore we are going to select the next set of scores up to use as our bottom baseline for this scale that we're working with. So, and then what we're doing with it, what we're probably going to end up doing is writing a paper for a special needs journal later on that talks about them, because they did some really creative things, but their scores were like, they say they're not creative at all.
Okay, so you rebaseline them right out.
We baseline them out of how we are reporting this, but we are not doing any quantitative analysis with this really, because our results show there was no significant difference from the scale before and after. But what we would do is what I just said. We would explain what happened. That would be perhaps one of the limitations of the study, or that would be data that we use for another project. And we would say, several scores indicated this, this, and this. This will be discussed in another paper.
So if I wanted to drop some questions, I'd have to provide a reason why I dropped them.
Well, if you were giving them a test and you wanted to pull out only the questions that you were looking at with your research questions, then I would say...
Because it's kind of a sales pitch too. You're trying to sell it.
Right. So,
whole
okay,
thing.
so ethically, you said about it as an ethical question, and I don't know that it's necessarily ethics. Ethics tend to mean something different. Ethics tend to mean the way that you're treating the participants that you have, the way that the people are, that you're making sure that they have adequate understanding of what they're doing, that you're not misrepresenting them.
I guess I'm kind of looking at it as a right or wrong, like when people talk about how you can make statistics say what you want.
Yes.
Type of thing,
I would say,
right or wrong type of thing there.
I would say that if your question is only looking at, let's say your question is looking at, I don't know, what do you think you want to study? Give me your topic.
Well, right now it's the using augmented reality for cognitive thinking in a 3D modeling situation.
Okay, so you have the students do this, and you have them talking about their experience, and you're interviewing them on what they think that they gained, the affordances of the augmented reality tool versus their, the detrimental effects of it. The fact that they got seasick, or the fact that the computer froze up, or their iPad was being all wacko, or whatever. Okay, so when you're reporting this, if you're talking about interviewing them and you're talking about the user's perception of it, do people cut out the negative things? I'm sure they do. Would I say that it's ethical, as you put it, ethical, to cut out the bad comments? No. I would put them in there and I would frame them however it is, and then I would use that data. If we were looking at it, though, and they were saying this experience was great, I literally learned a lot, this was super cool, however, the price of it's really unaffordable, and I don't think it's going to work well in my classroom because we only have one, and the internet's so bad, and you are only looking at user perception of it, but this person gave you all this other information that doesn't fit with the research question you're writing about, yeah, you can exclude that. That's a different paper. It's a different question.
Okay.
So that's how I would treat it. Does that answer your question better?
Yeah, that gets around to it, yep.
Yeah, well, kind of like whenever you're using statistical analysis, if you're looking, did you guys do correlations?
Yeah,
Yeah, Pearson's
I
correlation.
learned a little bit. I learned how
Okay.
to do it. I don't still understand it, but
It just says that the,
I learned how to do. We learned how to do it.
okay, so Pearson's correlation just says if it's a positive correlation, if my number is high on this side, then these two things are a lot alike. If it's a negative number and it's pretty high, then they're a lot not alike. So it's like slope on a line, positive. Okay, so let's say we're doing correlations, and I want to, like, my cutoff is supposed to be 0.5 for the journal that I'm using, but I have way too many things that are correlating and I don't want to deal with it. So maybe I bump up my bottom number to 0.6, and then I only have 3 correlations that I really want to talk about. Okay, so if I'm looking, that's a way that people wiggle the statistics also to narrow their data. And that happens in all things because you can't tell everything about everything. So you have to have some parameters, and really what you do then is tell people what your parameters were. So if I'm doing factor analysis, maybe I bump my criteria for selection from 0.4 to 0.6 because I want to have fewer factors that are there. So in the quantitative data, that's how you would do it. You would just change the parameters that you're using. Maybe you use a 90% confidence level instead of a 95% confidence level. And that broadens your area that you're having acceptable data land in. With quantitative work, maybe it's just the focus of your question. So you're only looking at the themes that were generated from, you're only looking at 2 themes that were generated with your interviews, and you have 3 other themes that are going to be another paper. That happens.
Okay.
Or I'm only looking at 1 source of data for this paper, not this paper, because I'm making you put in 3, because you're going to learn to triangulate your data. Because this is the only qualitative class that you get. That's how I would work with it. Pam.
And should we avoid doing this over the summer in our own institution?
You can play with it anywhere that you want. Here's how I framed it the first day, and I'll reframe it that way. You need to be able to collect data in 4 weeks. This does not have to be data that is used anywhere else. This can be testing. It's like some questions out, like practice interviews. Like if you're going up for a job interview, you have, 2 good friends interview and really grill you with hard questions so you're ready for your interview. This is kind of your practice interview for whenever you're doing your data collection, because most of you will have to do a little bit of qualitative data collection. Will push you to do that to broaden your literature or broaden your data set. So if you want to do it in your institution and they're not going to give you any trouble about, I'm sorry, I have hiccups now, not going to give you any trouble about it, then that's fine. If you want to do all of your data collection for your dissertation there and you think that this is exactly the topic that you're going to be using, I would be selective with what you do. And we can talk about that in one of your individual meetings in that. But I don't have any problem. I want you to be able to get your data and get your people. Because I had someone last time that was like, oh, I have access to like 20 gamers and I can do this. And then they had access to no gamers. And so they ended up like sitting and watching their nephew and 2 of his friends play and ask them questions. So I'm willing for you to collect data anywhere you can with anything you can manage to do it with, even if your population is going to be way different whenever you focus your study.
So you said interview, observation, and then I think
document analysis. Document analysis can be anything from like a written reflection that people do. It can be discussion board posts. It can be an online blog post. It can be comments that people leave on things. It can be written documents that are used within this setting that help kind of frame out the way things are going to be done. In a K-12, it could be the assignment or the class rules. In a workspace, it could be the handbook. It could be the parameters of the project you're working on, any of these kind of things, just so you can see kind of how you can work with it. It can also be photographs. So if you're taking screenshots, photographs, anything like that that is not necessarily somebody talking like this right now, like I'm talking, it can be any of those. And we'll get more into it. That's in like 3 weeks. So go ahead.
Do you think that you said that most people do the case study in the 4 weeks. Would the narrative research, would that be doable, the narrative research?
Depends on the question you have. Typically the questions people ask end up being either a very exploratory study questions where it kind of doesn't necessarily fit with any of the 5 types that they give you, or it ends up being more of an ethnography type of question because they're looking at how people interact in the culture of it, or they're looking at looking at how people did something or reacted to something or interacted with something. Narrative will work. We can work with narrative. There's also other ways, other methods that we can use to write this up. These are just 5 of the most common ones that they give you in the book. So as we craft it, we will go through your questions and see what kind of questions you want to ask and what you end up being able to ask within your constraints of your people you have access to. And that'll kind of determine the type of study that you're actually doing.
Okay, so that means I'm probably going to have to change mine because I'm going to have a tough time finding someone with access to the hardware software that I want to do.
Depends. You may not be able to use that software particularly, but you could probably find someone that would work with some AR stuff for you.
Okay.
I know one of the guys coming in cohort, whatever the new one coming in the fall is. 5, 4.
Oh no, well, there's
No,
4
there's one
already
coming
in,
out.
so 5.
Yeah, so 5. He's really interested in VR and AR, and he's working with some of that in, I want to say Vietnam, but I'm not sure if he's in Vietnam or if he just works for the Vietnam University. I know that there are some K-12 people that work with some VR stuff, and I know other people have had access to it and showed it to a couple people that they would consider a possible future participant group person and had them walk through.
All right, so I got to do a little research before I nail it down then.
Well, unless you have access to the software hardware right now.
No, I just know about it.
In?
Yeah, I just know about it, so it's a tough thing to hold up.
I would look at what's available easily and free to you. How close are you to campus?
Oh, about 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Okay, we have an Oculus Rift in the makerspace.
That's just the headset, yeah.
That's just the headset, but you can have. There's access to programming and things. We'll talk about later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm taking.
Yeah, but right now, don't worry about it because it might even be worth looking at just at people's perceptions of AR.
Okay.
And whether they think it has any value, because people automatically assume that the latest, greatest tech tools are going to be something that everybody's like, woohoo, let's use them because we are. Maybe you are. I don't know. I don't know you guys well enough to say yes, you are, but I am. And people are like, why do I want to change what I'm doing right now? It's going to be a lot of work, and I don't know even if it's going to be around in 3 years. You know, so there's a lot of ways that you can get around the topic that you're interested in to start playing with it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm nowhere near, like, here's my plan for today to talk about, and I don't even have any idea where we're at on that. Okay, so what we've been talking about now is kind of the stuff you're going to read about this week, which is the approaches and then writing your research questions. So research questions that you're going to be starting to look at and will come out of your literature that you're reading. So really by the end of week 4, you're going to need to have at least a little bit of a handle on your literature review and some of the things that you think are applicable to a study you may want to do. I am going to suggest for you, for the purposes of this, to look at the research that you're looking at. Let's say you want to look at social presence. And I don't know if I did not look at topics specifically before class tonight so that I wasn't like picking somebody out and like trashing your topic or making you feel like you couldn't do it now because I already talked about it. But so if I'm talking about something you want to talk about, then let me know. So if you're looking at social presence, there's a couple articles on social presence. There's a theoretical framework that someone uses that really incorporates social presence, especially with teachers, in a setting with these 5 elements that are present there. And so if I'm looking at social presence and I really only want to look at social presence, I want this piece of literature to be in my lit review so that I can use it then whenever I talk about it later. Because any good paper, especially a qualitative paper, is going to look like a sandwich. You're going to have your literature that's introduced in the lit review. Then you have the stuff that you do with it and the analysis, and then you have the discussion at the end. And it should tie through the whole thing. It should hit through all three pieces of this. So if you're talking about something in the literature review, then it can be used in the analysis piece. It can also be used at the end in your discussion. If it's a discussion, it has to be in the literature review somewhere. If you're using it in the analysis, it has to be in the literature review somewhere. So going from the back to the front, everything that's used in the analysis and in the discussion has to be in the literature review. Everything in the literature review does not necessarily have to track the whole way across, but that's one way that you can refine what you're talking about and narrow your topic, is by making sure that all the three pieces are there. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay. So what we're starting to do with this then is as you're reading, you're going to try and look for kind of a little hole in the literature. It talks an awful lot about, for social presence, maybe it talks an awful lot about teachers in a face-to-face classroom. It talks an awful lot about customer service representatives up here. It talks an awful lot about how people in gaming are using social presence online. But there's this big hole in the middle right here where we're talking about online teachers that are using games in their classroom, and they don't have anything about social presence in there from these three pieces of like areas that I'm interested in. So that little hole, that sweet spot in the middle, is a really fruitful ground for you to start looking at, because you don't want to have to do a lot of extra work that doesn't count towards your dissertation. You want the stuff that you're reading to be something you're interested in and not just something that has to be a class assignment. Number one, because it takes a lot of work and you don't want to do work that's not meaningful to you. And also because the stuff that you read now can save you time later if you can double dip and use it later. Not chunks of the paper and reuse them later with word for word, but the literature review and the summary that you've done and looking at how the pieces all fit together, those can be repurposed. That's a better word for it than the copy paste. Can be repurposed later, so that helps you out a little. So as you're kind of getting your ideas in that, you want to be kind of looking, because if you want to do online teacher social presence with kindergarten or like elementary kids, and there are 6,747 articles in the last 5 years on that, you're going to really have to look hard to find a place that has not already been done before. Because whenever you're trying to get a paper published, whenever you're trying to get push forward in the field and do this research that you're going to be doing, you want it to be something that has at least a small piece of it that is novel, that you can kind of claim as your own contribution to the knowledge of the world. So you have to have this little hole where you haven't done it. Now if you're really hitting the sweet spot, what you'll find is here you've done this and here somebody has done this, and they're really, really very similar. They may even overlap some, but you have these pieces that are in this hole in the middle where there's nothing being done, but you and another person are actually kind of overlapping with that. And that's kind of cool, because you're like, oh, I had a good idea. Somebody else is doing it just like me, but a little bit over to the side. And you can kind of work on this kind of complementary research to fill in that gap. So that's kind of where we're going with this. So to understand the 5 types, because you've asked a couple times about the 5 approaches: the ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, narrative, and the case study. The ones that I'm most familiar with out of these are phenomenology and case study and ethnography. I've worked in class and read papers and things like that with the other ones. But if you have a question that that really needs a grounded theory study in order to come up with the methodology to support learning what you want to learn, we will do it. Okay, even if we only get like our tippy toes dipped into the water for it, and your analysis is really brief, we will work on it. And then you can continue working on it with your other, your IIP or your dissertation or whatever. Do not think that you have to have a fully fleshed paper that would be out for publication at the end of this. This is going to be kind of you'll be able to write a good paper. You'll be able to have some findings and results. I do not expect it to look like you have spent 4 or 5 weeks analyzing your data and coming up with your results and writing it all. Okay, so don't worry that you're going to have to be putting in 70 hours a week in order to get this done. I'm being realistic with what I expect you to have, but I know you will be able to do good work in this amount of time. And so George, if you're thinking grounded theory is where you need to go, we will figure out a way to make grounded theory work. In the amount of time we have, it'd be kind of sketchy grounded theory, but we'll make it work.
No, I was just wondering why there was different numbers of participants.
Oh, typically with each of them, you're looking at being able to saturate your data pool. So if you're asking somebody, if you wanted to ask somebody if you're wearing a meat dress like Gaga did, X number of years ago, and you want to know if that's a really good look for you, and you ask 10 people, and all 10 people say, heck no. All right, you've kind of saturated your data. You've gotten to the point where you're not learning anything new about it. But if you've asked 10 people and you've got 7 different answers and 7 different explanations for why something's happening or how they feel about something, then you need to start to keep looking. And grounded theory, because you don't have a theory coming in with it, you're building the theory from the ground up completely. And the other ways you're coming in with the theory and kind of looking for an explanation for it or fleshing it out or seeing how it fits in different places. Because you're starting at the bottom and going up, you need more people and more data usually in order to be able to create this level of theory at the top that's more abstract. So that's why the numbers are different.
All right.
Yeah, but I'm only going to make you guys do, I'm going to require, I'd like you to have 3 interviews. I'd like you to have more, but 3 interviews. I'd like you to have about an hour and a half of video or of recorded interview. I'm going to suggest that. But you can do an hour and a half of video with one person, or you can do an hour and a half of interview with one person, or it can be an hour and a half with 15. All right. It's going to kick us off of here. Do you have more questions, and do you want to talk more about things? Do you have questions you want to ask about it? Tell you what, you have the link from the first one. It'll be the same link. I'm in the same room every single time. I keep my number. You are welcome to come back and talk more, or you're welcome to be done for the evening, and you can address your questions with me whenever we talk next week individually. How's that? All right, so I will be here. You can come back and see me, or you can say adios and head out for the hills tonight. And I'm sorry I talked too much.
Adios.
Hi. It says less than a minute, but it's been saying less than a minute for a while. I didn't hear what somebody said. I just talked over you.
Oh, they're all leaving.
Yeah, they're all leaving. That's okay.
I have questions, but I can wait for the individual just because.
It's okay. If you want to just.
It's just about my topic and stuff. I'm just not.
Okay, so tell you what. It's going to kick us off, and you can log right back in on this one, and I'll log right back in on this one. And yeah, we're going to hop to the next one, and we'll be out of here. We'll be back in just a second then.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to close it and open it right back up.
Okay.